your life.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Tonight's show is going to be phenomenal. I'm really excited because we're going to be talking all about magnesium. Now, magnesium is one of the most well-studied nutrients. It's a mineral in the body. It has about 700 different functions. Many would argue that there are more functions even than that. We just haven't discovered them yet. But magnesium, a very abundant mineral in our body that runs and drives a lot of different functions. So we're going to be diving into everything you wanted to know or everything you should know about magnesium. But before we do, as always, make sure you're chiming in. I want to know who you are and where you're from in the world. I'd like to know how far we're reaching, and we'll get diving right in the show tonight. Looks like we've got several of you already asking questions and commenting in. That's exciting to me. Love that. We got St. Beach, Florida, and Tennessee, and we got Australia, and we've got Wyoming, and we've got Canada. So again, keep tuning in or keep chiming in and letting me know where you're from, and we're going to dive right in to the show. So magnesium. "700 functions and counting." And let's talk about what some of the big kind of large spectrum jobs that magnesium does. So one of the things that is very important for magnesium is that it regulates energy production in your body. And it's one of the reasons why magnesium deficiency causes so many people problems with fatigue, carbohydrate intolerance, or sugar imbalances, because it helps your body to convert carbohydrate energy or carbohydrates into ATP, which is what the body uses for energy. So the regulation of energy production is one of its big priorities. Now, magnesium also regulates hormone production. And so if we're looking at, for example, women, progesterone, can't make it without magnesium. Estrogen, you can't metabolize it properly without magnesium. If you don't have adequate magnesium, then your body can actually build up toxic metabolites of estrogen that can increase your risk of cancer. Men, you can't make testosterone without magnesium. Now, magnesium also regulates the nervous system. I like to call magnesium the lost electrolyte, not because it was ever lost, but because so many people don't realize that it is actually an electrolyte. And what is an electrolyte? It's something that helps the electrical conductivity of your body work. Well, your brain's an electrical system, your nervous system is electrical, and it requires magnesium to properly work. Now, aside from the electrical properties, the charge of magnesium and how it regulates the membranes and gates that help run your nerves, you also need magnesium to generate certain neurotransmitters. So in that regard, it regulates not only the electrical function of the nervous system, but also regulates the production of chemicals that regulate that electrical system. So things like dopamine, you need magnesium for it. You need magnesium for serotonin. You need magnesium for acetylcholine. So again, very, very important neuroregulatory functions of magnesium. Now, you also need magnesium for cell membrane production. Your cell membranes, the covers around your membranes of your cells that keep your cells inside contents separate from the outside contents. You need that. You need magnesium for that. So membrane regularity, very important as a function for magnesium. You also need magnesium for the production of protein. You need magnesium for methylation. Many of you may have heard of, if you've had your genetics ever tested, there's a gene called COMT. That stands for catechol-O-methyltransferase. It's driven, if this gene is an engine, magnesium is the car key that starts it. This engine actually regulates dopamine and it regulates methylation, so it helps your body understand what methylation is. If we're really oversimplifying it, it's a major detoxification pathway. And we use methylation to do a lot of detoxification. So magnesium is important in that regard. One of the other functions of magnesium, so we were going to put in here methylation, is magnesium, you need it to activate vitamin D. Now, we talked about vitamin D last week and how important vitamin D was. So think about it like this. Anytime you have a magnesium deficiency, symptomatically speaking, all those things we talked about last week with vitamin D, you could also have. So This is why magnesium is one of the most critical nutrients in the body. It has more functions than any other nutrient that we've studied. And some of those functions have overlaps with the way other nutrients, other proteins, and other things get magnesium. A lot of people are supplementing, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about supplements here in a minute. But let's talk about food first, because look, I'm a big believer in food first, and if your diet's not right, it doesn't matter how many pills that you take. You know, if the food isn't right, you're not going to be right. The pills just become a substitute, but nature provides magnesium in the most bioavailable forms, so don't forget that. We want it from food. So what are some of the best foods? Well, predominantly speaking, foods rich. Number one is leafy greens. Now, there are a variety of different leafy greens you can chomp into. We've got things like spinach, we've got kale, we've got chard, we've got Swiss chard, we've got rainbow chard, we've got beet greens, mustard greens. So the whole family, or the whole kind of combination of different leafy greens, very important. So think of it, if it's a leafy green, it's going to have lots of magnesium in it. Additionally, we're going to get magnesium from wild-caught fish, particularly wild-caught cold water fish. So think in terms, think halibut, herring, mackerel, really good sources of magnesium in the diet. You're going to get magnesium from meats. So we said fish, but also red meats. Magnesium is present a lot in muscle tissue. That's where it hangs out to help the muscles. It regulates muscle contractility and muscle tone. We didn't put that here, but that's part of its job in the nervous system. Other food sources for magnesium beyond that: almonds, a really good source of magnesium; figs, a really good source of magnesium; pumpkin seed, a really good source of magnesium. So again, food options have to be at the top of the list for your consumption in order to get adequate magnesium. You can add garlic to this list as well if you'd like to. Garlic is very rich in magnesium as well. So those are some of the best places to get magnesium. Now, I saw a question come in earlier on topical versus supplemental magnesium, and we'll talk about that in a minute, why one might work better than the other. But again, it starts with what you put in your mouth. So let's talk about what causes magnesium deficiency. So we'll draw us a line over here and type in deficiency. The number one in the U.S. diet is sugar. And what I'm talking, when I say sugar, I'm really reflecting on processed sugar. I'm not talking about natural sugars that might be found in fruits. I'm talking about processed sugar. So if it's got added sweetener, added sugar in it, understand that for every carbohydrate sugar that you eat, to break down one molecule of sugar, in running it through the proper biochemistry, there are 8 different steps in that cycle, and half of those steps, more than half of those steps, actually require magnesium. And what happens when you eat processed sugar without magnesium, remember, sugar has no nutritional value. There's no magnesium in sugar. Your body has to find the magnesium from somewhere. So if you're eating foods high in sugar, your body steals that magnesium from your own storage to process that sugar and try to convert it into energy. So sugar is hands down, in my experience, the number one cause of magnesium deficiency in the U.S. What are some of the other causes? The second one is high stress. Stress depletes magnesium. Now, I'm not talking about acute stress where you have a bad day. I'm talking about chronic, prolonged stress. It's repetitive. It doesn't go away. Maybe you hate your job. Maybe you're in a bad relationship. Maybe you're taking a really stressful class in college, like whatever that might be. If that stress goes chronic, you're losing magnesium consistently. What else causes magnesium deficiency? Well, I'm going to say it, coffee. Now, there's a rumor going around the internet that coffee is just really super rich in magnesium. That's not true. Coffee's not that rich in magnesium at all. but it's not really even necessarily the coffee directly, but it's what's in the coffee, caffeine. Now, I'm not talking about the person that drinks a 6-ounce cup of coffee a day, but I'm talking about you, if you're driving through the Starbucks line or you're going into the McDonald's and you're picking up, these, 20-ounce cups. That's not a cup of coffee, by the way. That's about 3 cups of coffee. A cup is 6 ounces. So 1 cup of coffee, the caffeine, and that's about 120 milligrams of caffeine. You'll be okay with that if that's all you're doing on a daily basis. But if you're doing these 20 ounces, these big jugs, if you're drinking 3-4 cups a day, if you're the pot a day kind of person, the quantity of caffeine that you're consuming, know that caffeine's a diuretic that depletes magnesium at higher doses. So if you're taking in high quantities of coffee, again, large, bigger than 6 ounces. So greater than 6 ounces. Did I do that right? No. I think I'm off the board here. Greater than 6 ounces, that's when you start really getting into trouble. Now, what else can cause a magnesium deficiency? And probably the most, we'll say one of the rarest to be discussed is medicine. Generally you go to the doctor and you think, hey, I'm taking this medicine, my doctor gave it to me, it's going to improve my fill in the blank, my situation, right? And those of you tuning into this show probably know better, but many medicines deplete magnesium. Let's go through kind of a short list, but blood pressure medications deplete magnesium. Antacid medications deplete magnesium. Some antibiotics can deplete magnesium. Some antidepressants deplete magnesium. Some anti-seizure medications can deplete magnesium. So many different medicines will cause this to happen. And ladies, for you, you should know one of the biggest, we'll just write it in here, are estrogen medicines, birth control pills or estrogen substitutes. So I'll just put the big ones in. Hypertension, so blood pressure medicine, birth control pills, and then subsequently to that, antacids. These are really the top 3 that will deplete the magnesium from your body over time. So it's not if you took, for example, it's not if you took blood pressure, or not blood pressure, but an antacid last night. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the chronic use of these medications over long periods of time, over months. They start to deplete, either they deplete the nutrient itself or they inhibit your body to be able to use the nutrient, or they actually cause an excessive excretion of that nutrient. So those are some of the different mechanisms, but very, very common to see medicine deplete magnesium over time. And we'll talk a little bit in a minute. I'm going to draw you a picture because I really want you to see this. Now there's another thing that causes magnesium deficiency that many of you suffer from, and that goes back to inflammation of the gut. So if your gut's broken, you're not absorbing very well. And where does magnesium get absorbed? It gets absorbed in the small intestine. So if your gut's on fire, if you've got an irritable or an inflammatory bowel disease like celiac disease, Crohn's, or ulcerative colitis, or if you've got other kind of non-specific inflammatory diseases that you've been diagnosed with, those, some people get a diagnosis of gastritis. Like, what does that mean? It means inflammation of the stomach. Esophagitis, inflammation of the esophagus. Some of these different terms, but if you've got inflammation in your GI tract and it's hindering or affecting your body's ability to digest and absorb nutrients from the food that you eat, then you're at risk for deficiency. So think of this as kind of the big list of different things that you want to know about if you're doing them, or things that you can change about your lifestyle or behavior that might help you move in the right direction. So let's switch gears here because I want to give you some food for thought tonight as it relates to number 4. A lot of people don't realize, I'm going to give you a couple different scenarios. Let's say you've got high blood pressure. We're abbreviating that as HTN, hypertension is what that stands for. And let's say your blood pressure's up, right? And so the doctor prescribed you medicine for that. And the medicine depletes your magnesium. The higher your blood pressure gets. Now, I want to be real clear. We talked about this in past shows where one of the big factors involved with the cause of high blood pressure is actually low magnesium. Low magnesium is known to cause your blood pressure to go up. It's partly because magnesium regulates muscle tension. Now think about that for a minute. Your heart's a muscle and so are your blood vessels. And so if your blood vessels can't properly dilate and contract and they're stuck kind of in a spastic or a spasmodic position, then it's going to increase the tension or the pressure on the wall of the arteries. And that's what blood pressure elevations are. When we measure blood pressure, we're actually measuring the pressure on the arterial wall. And so if magnesium deficiency is present, it increases the pressure on that wall because it causes a vasoconstriction or a constriction of the blood vessel. So my point in saying this is if you're on the medicine to lower your blood pressure, but the medicine causes magnesium deficiency and magnesium deficiency increases muscular tension on your vascular arterial tree and it creates an increase in your blood pressure, what are we doing? What's the scenario? What is the outcome? Are we winning this? No, we're losing. This is a losing battle. You're not going to win here if this is the scenario, right? So you've got to figure out, I always go back to what, functional medicine, which is root cause resolution. You've got to figure out why the blood pressure is elevated in the first place. You can't just go after it with a medicine and expect that medicine is somehow miraculously going to fix why your body is driving up your blood pressure in the first place. Remember, elevations in blood pressure are a symptom of a deeper problem. They're not the actual problem itself. They're a symptom of the problem. So let's talk now, since we're talking about symptoms, let's talk about some of the symptoms of magnesium deficiency. What are you looking for? What are kind of some of the things that if you have them could indicate that you might be deficient in magnesium? The number one symptom that I see in practice is muscle cramps and spasms. Now, if you've ever had an eyelid twitch, or a shoulder muscle involuntarily twitch, or a leg muscle involuntarily twitch, those are the spasms, the uncontrollable spasms that I'm referring to. The cramps themselves are when the muscles go into a full-blown cramp. If you've ever woken up in the middle of the night and your toes are cramping or your calf is cramping, that's magnesium deficiency most likely. Can also be calcium deficiency, but magnesium and calcium work together. They kind of hold hands to help regulate the muscle control, the muscle contractility and relaxability. And so, again, muscle cramps and spasms, major symptom. Now, remember that your heart's a muscle, your blood vessels are a muscle, and even too, what else is a muscle? Your gut is a muscle, right? It works through peristaltic action as muscles are squeezing and pushing that food down and through from your mouth to your anus, right? And so a lot of people with magnesium deficiency develop, we'll put this at number 2, develop heart problems. And even though this is not technically a symptom, it would be classified as a disease linked to magnesium deficiency, but heart problems. But we've also got number 3 here, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, because if your bowels are spastic, if they're not working right, it can create constipation and or diarrhea and or back and forthing of those things intermittently. We also have as a symptom of magnesium deficiency fatigue. We can develop depression when magnesium levels drop. And again, this goes back to the fatigue, goes back to what I was saying earlier. You need magnesium to break down carbohydrate and generate energy from that food that you're eating. And if you don't have adequate magnesium, your body's not going to effectively generate the energy that it needs, and that fatigue is going to set in. I'm going to add a kind of a half symptom up here, but poor flexibility is another one. I forgot to mention this a moment ago because your ability to touch your toes, for example, many people say, I'm just naturally a tight person. You may have just had a very long-standing magnesium deficiency. I've seen a number of people be able to improve their flexibility, their stretching, their range of motion through magnesium supplementation. So if you can barely touch your toes, If your muscles are really super tight and they're tight all the time, shoulder tension, shoulder stiffness, shoulder tightness, neck stiffness, those are all possible outcomes of that muscle. Understand it, a muscle cramp, it doesn't have to be a cramp that like lights you on fire with pain. It can just be that your muscles are tighter and it reduces your capacity for flexibility. Now, additionally, let's keep adding. So we've also got stress mechanism. When you don't have magnesium, you can't handle stress. Your body loses its capacity to deal with stress in a normal way. Number 7, we're moving up here. PMS, premenstrual symptoms. And so like magnesium deficiency around the cycle can cause excessive bleeding. Magnesium deficiency around the cycle can cause depression. It can cause water retention. So a number of things that magnesium can do. It can also cause severe sugar cravings. So those of you, and this is premenstrual sugar cravings, but also not even around the cycle, you can have sugar cravings when your magnesium levels are low. And that's because if your body can't convert sugar to energy because the magnesium is too low, then your body's going to send a message back to your brain saying eat more because it needs to be able to get energy. But the problem is with again, in this case, is the brain is trying to tell you to eat more, but the problem isn't necessarily that you need to eat more. The problem is what you're actually eating. Because if you're eating sugar, like I said earlier, if you're eating sugar highly refined, then you're not getting magnesium and you're just potentially making the problem worse. Number 9, a lot of people with magnesium deficiency can develop heartburn. Now, what did I say earlier? I said inflamed esophagus, inflamed stomach, right? Inflammatory gut problems. And so what's we kind of look at this scenario. Let's just slash heartburn, right? Doctor prescribes a medicine. That medicine lowers magnesium. Magnesium feeds back into the heartburn. Again, how many of these different kinds of scenarios could we map out, could we draw out, knowing what we now know? So keeping in mind, these are some of your more common symptoms of magnesium deficiency. And if you're experiencing these things, it's probably very highly suspect that you may have a problem with it. So if these are the symptoms, and symptoms are, think of symptoms as maybe like pre-disease as opposed to actual disease itself, right? So let's talk now about diseases. Now, the FDA won't allow us to say that magnesium causes disease directly. What the FDA, because if magnesium was the cause of a disease, then the FDA, by definition, would try to make magnesium a drug. And if it was a drug, it had to be regulated by the FDA, and then it would be intended to treat, cure, or diagnose problems. And of course, the FDA is not going to have that with magnesium. But these are diseases that are linked to not having adequate magnesium. In essence, we know these diseases exist as a result in people having low levels of magnesium. And so probably the biggest class is heart disease. And there are a number of different types of heart disease. Many of you may have like abnormal arrhythmic heartbeats. Those can be caused by magnesium deficiency. High blood pressure, which we mentioned earlier, can be caused by magnesium deficiency. Mitral valve prolapse is linked to MVP, to magnesium deficiency as well. So several forms of heart disease. Now another one which is more of a vascular disease versus heart is that increased blood viscosity can be caused by magnesium deficiency. What does that mean? It means that magnesium being too low will cause your blood to become too thick and too sticky. And again, when your blood is thick and sticky, it puts more pressure on your heart, right? And that in and of itself is going to drive up blood pressure and going to create problems. So one of the reasons why this happens is magnesium helps keep platelets regularly working. See, platelets are what clot your blood, and if you don't have enough magnesium, then your platelets start to behave a little bit too aggressively, and they can overclot your blood. If you've ever had your blood drawn, and the phlebotomist says, wow, your blood is really sticky or really thick, it was really hard to draw, it took a long time to come out, it's because your blood's too thick. Your blood should come out of your vein when you get a venipuncture very, very quickly and very, very easy if it's healthy. Healthy blood is relatively thin and comes out really, really easy. So heart disease, a big factor as a disease or a state of diseases, if you will, with magnesium levels being low. Another one is neurological disease. And I mentioned this earlier. Magnesium deficiency because of its role in regulating nervous system function, we'll see neurological diseases. Now, there are a number of different neurological diseases as well. Depression is a form of neurological disease. Neuropathy, numbness, tingling, pain of the extremities, is a form, of nerve disease as well. Migraine headaches are a form of neurological disease. So these are really super common nerve problems linked to magnesium. Migraine headache is actually, there's so much research now on magnesium deficiency tending to contribute to migraine headache. It's surprising to me how few doctors actually make that connection or actually tell patients to go out and get a magnesium supplement who suffer with migraine headaches. On a side note here, one of the problems that happens with women who are giving birth to babies is there's a disease state called preeclampsia. And what oftentimes is done in a hospital scenario, if you've got a really good OB-GYN or you've got a really good doctor, is they will actually IV magnesium into you. It's one of the treatments for preeclampsia in many hospitals, and that's a form of high blood pressure. I just thought I'd mention that because many of you may have been told during pregnancy that your blood pressure was going up and getting kind of dangerously high. Well, that might be a sign that you need more magnesium as well. So, neurological disease. Then we have musculoskeletal diseases. So, diseases that affect your bones, diseases that affect your muscle tissue. So, chronic muscle pain, fibromyalgia is one. And some would argue that fibromyalgia is actually a neurological disease, so it kind of goes back and forth between the two. It's a pain-based disease where the muscles hurt, but many people believe that it's because of nervous system dysfunction, and there's truth to both sides of that. But fibromyalgia is one. We also have myopathy, which is basically muscle pain of non-fibromyalgic nature. So just generalized muscle pain and not muscle pain because you've injured yourself, but just your muscles hurt, muscle aches, muscle pains. So magnesium deficiency will contribute to a lot of what we call tension pains in the body, where your muscles just, again, we talked about this earlier, they become, well, I erased it, but your muscles can become over tight, and when they become over tight and the tension is in them, then the blood flow won't reach the muscles as aggressively, the oxygen won't get into the muscles as well, and they'll start to develop you can start to develop painful problems. Additionally, in the bone, we know that osteoporosis is linked to magnesium deficiency. So several different diseases that we know that magnesium can definitely contribute to. Now, on other notes, there's some endocrine disorders, some disorders of hormones, if you will, such as diabetes. And I'm talking about more specifically type 2 diabetes, blood sugar diabetes. There's a strong connection, and that's because you need magnesium to properly regulate insulin production. Magnesium is an insulin regulator, so if you don't have adequate magnesium, you can actually become more and more insulin resistant, but also remember that magnesium helps break down sugar. And if you don't have the capacity to break down sugar, your sugar levels can come up, and then that ends up as on the outcome of diabetes, which is elevations in your blood sugar levels overall. Hypothyroidism is another big one linked to magnesium deficiency. You need magnesium to regulate TSH, which is a hormone coming out of your pituitary gland called thyroid stimulating hormone. TSH, magnesium regulates the production of that hormone, and if you don't have adequate magnesium, again, there's a linkage to hypothyroid disease with that particular problem. Sex hormone deficiencies as well. Again, we're talking about hormone-based diseases. So I said earlier, progesterone and estrogen and testosterone are all somewhat magnesium dependent in order for them to properly be produced. So those are issues. Now, estrogen dominance, so many of you may have been told that you're estrogen dominant. That can be a symptom of magnesium deficiency as well. But then we also have, beyond that, we have constipation and irritable bowel syndrome. I mentioned that earlier as we were talking as well. So kind of a long list of different disease states, and this again is not being as fully comprehensive. Magnesium is actually responsible for playing a role in about 60 different diseases. These are just some of the bigger categories that I wanted to cover with you tonight, so that if you're sitting here watching this and you're struggling or suffering with any of these problems, that you can look at magnesium as it might be one of the problems. So let's move on to the next part, which is now we know about what magnesium is, we know what the symptoms of deficiency are, we know where the foods are, we know the drug interactions, we know what causes magnesium deficiency. So next, let's talk about supplementing with magnesium. We talked about foods already, but let's talk about, look, if your magnesium levels are low, you know, what supplements are going to work, what supplements should you take, what supplements should you not take. So, supplementation. There are lots of different forms of magnesium on the market. There's glycinate, which is one of my favorite. There's citrate, which is another one of my favorite. Just clinically, they tend to work extremely well. Now, what can happen with glycinate for some people is if you take it in too high of a dose, it can cause water into the bowel. It can bring water into the bowel and create kind of a loose bowel or a diarrhea, and that may not be the best source for some people. But when you combine these two, it tends to work really well without creating that problem. There are other forms of magnesium as well. Magnesium gluconate. We've got magnesium malate. So again, a couple of forms, and then there's magnesium oxide. Now this form I don't so much recommend. It's very poorly absorbed. The pills are huge because magnesium oxide, in order to get the magnesium in it, it's mostly oxide and very little magnesium, so the pills get bigger. And it's not, because it's not very readily absorbed, it's just not a good source. So if you're looking like at a multivitamin, if you're looking on the bottle of your magnesium and this is the term you're seeing, it's probably not worth what you paid for it. And, you know, best advice I could give you is throw it in the garbage and start over and look at some of these other forms. Now, if you do have a problem when you take magnesium with it causing loose bowels, there is a form of magnesium you can take that doesn't tend to create that, and that's magnesium chloride. Magnesium chloride, although it's not by concentration, it doesn't have as much magnesium in it, elementally speaking, as some of these others. It's a better form in terms of not getting the side effect of diarrhea. Now, some also find that you can absorb magnesium through the skin, so magnesium oil is another option, and then Epsom is another option. So these are kind of most of your big options here. Epsom salt or magnesium sulfate, and bathing in it, you can absorb it through the skin. So if you struggle with the diarrhea aspect, or maybe you already have problems with loose bowels and you're just trying to potentially get more magnesium, you might consider an oil or an Epsom salt bath on a nightly basis to be better options for yourself in terms of getting your magnesium. Now, how much is safe to take? Generally speaking, anywhere between 200 and 1,000 milligrams a day. Now, I would say this, if you're going to shoot up over 1,000, you need to have your levels measured. You need to be having that monitored because look, you can overdo even though magnesium is relatively safe and most people are deficient in it, and so this range is for most people not going to be a problem. It's never a bad idea if you're doing something in higher doses chronically to have it evaluated. So, we'll talk about tests to do that here in just a second. But 200 to 1,000 milligrams per day is, again, it's a relatively safe adult recommendation to get that much on a daily basis. Now, if you want to regulate or if you want to measure your levels, one of the best tests to look at magnesium is the red blood cell test. And it's one that you can ask any doctor to order as long as they'll order it for you. Now, some will tell you no, even though it's a standard medical test. But a red blood cell magnesium test is one of the better ways to evaluate your magnesium status. And a level 6 or higher, about 6.5 is a really good range to try to shoot for on a test like that. But the best way, in my experience and in my opinion, the best way to really evaluate magnesium is through what's called lymphocyte proliferation, where you're looking at magnesium levels not in the red blood cells, but in the white blood cells. And so very, very accurate way to help you assess magnesium deficiency. Now, many of you may get a magnesium level in your serum, like your doctor might order a serum magnesium level a very, very poor marker, very poor indicator for magnesium status. It's not worth the paper that it's printed on. You don't want to rely on serum magnesium levels to discern whether or not you are high or low or have a greater need for magnesium. So make sure that you don't, that you don't make that mistake and don't get your levels measured and depend on that as a tool to help guide you in the direction of how much to take and when to take it. So let's see here. Man, we talked about a lot of stuff tonight, so let's make sure I grab these questions from you. Okay, so Susan wants to know, can you tell me the difference between taking magnesium orally and using magnesium oil topically, or how that works? I've been finding that magnesium oil helps with my pain a lot more. And I'm going to assume when you say PSA pain, you're referring to psoriatic arthritis. Correct me if I'm wrong. There are several different reasons why magnesium on the skin might work better than taking like an oral supplement. When you take an oral supplement, especially if you've got an autoimmune disease, understand if you've got an autoimmune disease, the likelihood that you have an inflammatory bowel is very high. Autoimmune disease comes usually with a leaky gut. And so if your gut's damaged or your gut's inflamed, remember as we were talking about earlier, we were talking about the different causes of magnesium deficiency. If your gut's inflamed and not able to take the magnesium orally and get it into your system as effectively, you can still apply it to the skin directly and still get absorption that way. So if you're noticing that topical application helps with your pain a lot more, then more power to you on that topical application. But you need to get your gut figured out and understand that if your oral supplementation is not working, it's probably because your gut's not working. Let's see. Luella says, does magnesium raise blood pressure upon waking and normalize it the rest of the day? No, not typically. That's not a typical. Now, there are people that have atypical symptoms associated with magnesium, and that's one thing we didn't really talk about is what are the potential side effects of too much magnesium. And for most people, it's severe fatigue and lethargy. Like they feel like they really can't get out of bed in the morning. Not so much, though, high blood pressure, but more specifically that fatigue and lethargy are those symptoms. Now, who shouldn't, that's something else I think I should bring up. Who should not take this dose of magnesium? Like, who's not a good candidate for that? If you've got a kidney disorder like kidney failure and your kidneys are not functioning at full capacity, I do not recommend you take supplemental magnesium without your doctor's approval and without your levels being monitored to make sure that you don't create a bigger problem. If you've got bowel obstruction, I don't recommend you take a lot of magnesium. We don't have a great way to excrete magnesium, and so if your bowels are blocked up, that could create a problem for you in terms of the potential for magnesium toxicity. So again, kidney disease, bowel obstruction, if either of those kind of two problems fits your problem personally, then again, I don't really recommend this unless you're having that really monitored and having that really followed well. Question, what is BCP? BCP stands for birth control pills. Let's see, what is the best magnesium supplement to take? There are too many kinds. Yeah, I think I just answered that question. If you're looking for the best, I actually recommend a product called Ultra MG. And it's a blend of different magnesiums. And it's actually one that is part of my design. It's a blend of different magnesiums, and the goal of it is to not create that loose bowel effect, but to provide a blend of different amino acid chelates to minimize that bowel effect while maximizing your body's absorption and ability to utilize it. Okay, so yeah, it's a good question. Julie says, should you spread the dose throughout the day? Yes, absolutely. So think of a dose of magnesium as being about 200 milligrams for most people, 200 milligrams of magnesium spread out. Again, if you're going to shoot for 1,000, spread out over several doses, 2 hours apart or more, 2 hours apart or more being, a good kind of split out. On that note too, there was a kind of magnesium, I think somebody was asking about sleep. There's a kind of magnesium that I didn't write on the board here, and I'll just add that in because if you're suffering from sleep problems, if you're not able to sleep at night, That's another symptom of magnesium deficiency is poor sleep. But there's a blend of magnesium, let's see if I can fit this, called magnesium threonate. And this particular magnesium, this is a chelate that when bound to magnesium helps take magnesium past the blood-brain barrier and get it into the brain so that it's being utilized more effectively by the brain. And again, several enzymes in the brain that regulate sleep are magnesium dependent. And so that's one that could be very, very effective. And it's threonate. Somebody's asking about threonate. There is no threonate, but it's a THR, not a THE. It's a THRE. Yeah, that was good timing because as soon as I started talking about that, a bunch of people started chiming in about it. Yeah, I don't recommend, magnesium threonate is not good to take throughout the day because it can make you groggy and sleepy. Its better design is to take it before bedtime. We call it sleep magnesium. It's one that can be very, very helpful for improving your ability to get to sleep at night. Okay, let's see here. Michelle wants to know how much Epsom salt in an Epsom salt bath. At least a couple of cups if you're measuring, but it depends on the size of your bathtub too. You know, a couple of cups is a good place to start with a standard bathtub, but you can add a lot more to that if you want a greater magnesium effect. My thoughts on Celtic sea salt as a source of magnesium. It's not a great source of magnesium. I wouldn't rely on sea salt as a source of magnesium. Lisa wants to know, can a magnesium threonate be stimulating? Usually it's not. Now again, there are people that have kind of what's called a paradoxical effect with different supplements. So like the effect that most people have, person might have the opposite effect. And where magnesium threonate really could be stimulating is as it's pushing magnesium into your brain, your thoughts can become clear. If you're really deficient in magnesium, you might get stimulated in a way that isn't like stimulatory, like excited and I'm like pumped and full of energy, but more of I can think clearly again, the brain fog is lifting. So stimulatory in your capacity to think and have cognitive function, but not necessarily stimulatory like caffeine per se. How long does it take for magnesium supplements to take effect if you're depleted? How long will you typically have to take them to bring your levels up? It's a great question. Generally speaking, if your dose is right, you'll notice magnesium working. A lot of people notice it within about 30 minutes. I know when I take magnesium at night, I notice it within about 15 minutes of taking it. And many people report that back to me as they notice it relatively quickly. They notice improvements in some of those symptoms and they can kind of feel it, so to speak, working. And it's sometimes it's a very unique experience because, again, not everybody's experience is going to be the same. But as far as like supplementation, how long does it take to get a general correction of magnesium? That's a great question, and here's what it depends on. It depends on these factors over here. Because if you're doing these things consistently and you're trying to use supplementation as a method but ignoring these potential things over here, you'll be taking magnesium forever and you're not going to correct it. But if you're truly addressing these factors on this side, if you're truly addressing the foods and you're getting magnesium in your diet and you're digging yourself out of a hole in the short term with supplementation, I generally will supplement people that come to see me anywhere from usually 4 to 6 months, but usually closer to 6 months before reevaluating their levels to see if we've got good magnesium saturation. And if we do, then we withdraw supplementation. It's not something that, I know a lot of people are out there saying, you just got to take magnesium. You just have to take it every day and it doesn't matter what food you eat or what diet you have. Yes, it does. It very much matters, and not everybody needs magnesium supplementation. Again, you got to dial these pieces in first and don't just, use this as a crutch. When you use a supplement as a crutch without addressing the fundamental core as to why the supplement's low in the first place, there's a name for that. It's not functional medicine. It's called green medicine, where you're giving something as a tool to help somebody symptomatically, but you're not addressing the underlying reason as to why they need that tool indefinitely. You don't want to be stuck on 20,000 pills for the rest of your life. Look, if you really want to be healthy, you've got to address root cause and make that a priority in your life. Is it true that magnesium helps distribute calcium? I mean, yes. For calcium and magnesium is regulatory of calcium. That's why a lot of times you'll see supplements that are calcium magnesium combined. I actually have one called CalMag, and it's, if anybody is calcium deficient, one of the recommendations for osteoporosis, and almost every OB-GYN in the country, almost every doctor in the country who knows nothing about nutrition will make the generic recommendation to take more calcium if you have bone loss. If you've got a bone scan, look, go back at, first of all, if you've got a bone scan that shows osteoporosis, go back and watch my prior show. Go back and watch the rerun on bone myths, bone scan myths. Okay, that's very important that you do that. But if you have osteoporosis and you've been told to take 1,000, 1,200 milligrams of calcium, understand that too much calcium will actually cause a magnesium deficiency, and that's why it's a 2-to-1 ratio. When you're talking about taking calcium, always take it with magnesium in a 2-to-1 ratio. Otherwise, you're going to deplete magnesium. But you also need magnesium to help calcium do its job. See, at the end of your nerve synapses, just draw you a quick picture here. If your nerve synapse kind of looks like this, and at the end of it, there's something called a calcium channel. And so what happens is when that signal comes down the nerve and depolarizes the end of the nerve, this calcium channel will open up and calcium will flood into the nerve, and it will help. All these little bubbles inside the nerve contain neurotransmitters. In this case, we'll just say hypothetically that these little neurotransmitters in this case are serotonin. And so these little bubbles, calcium tells these little bubbles to release the serotonin into what's called the synaptic cleft, which is the area between the nerves, so that these chemicals of serotonin can tell the next nerve what to do. Well, this calcium channel is regulated by magnesium. So if you don't have adequate magnesium, then this calcium channel is not going to properly open and close, and you're not going to get good regulatory function of the way your nerve is supposed to work. So very, very important and great question on the relationship between calcium and magnesium. Okay. Let's see. I had your product magnesium. When is the best time to take also with vitamin D3 or at night alone? So you can take them together. You don't have to separate them. There's not a best time per se. The best time, if you're taking something to try to have an impact or an effect on your physiology, the best way to take it is consistently, right? It's not whether it's taken at 2 or whether it's taken at 4. Now, if you're on other kinds of medications or if you're on things that it might interfere with, you got to be careful in that regard. But you can take magnesium and vitamin D concomitantly or together, and there's no risk in doing that. Yvette wants to know, what about zinc? What role does zinc have to play with magnesium? Well, zinc is another mineral. They have a similar valence. Zinc and magnesium, same valence, same charge, but they're not the same functions. Zinc is regulatory of about 200 different chemical reactions in the body. It's actually one of our topics coming up. And so, spoiler alert, I'm not going to dive too heavy into zinc tonight, but zinc and magnesium don't have that same type of role that calcium and magnesium do. Zinc's technically not an electrolyte, and so they don't kind of play together in that same way. Thanks for that compliment, Elizabeth. That was very, very sweet of you. I'm glad you're learning. That is the whole goal of this show. If you walk away from any one of my shows not knowing something new, I haven't done my job very well. So I love to hear that you're all learning, because that's what it's about. Let's see here. Transdermal Magnesium Oil. Somebody's asking about that. As I mentioned earlier, transdermal is great. Again, some people have inflammatory bowels, and so they're not absorbing magnesium very well. And so to take a transdermal version sometimes is actually better than an oral form. Okay, let's see here. Are there more animal-based foods rich in magnesium? Look, if you want to eat organ meat's one of the best, most nutrient-dense sources of all nutrients, of all vitamins and minerals. So liver, kidney, thymus gland. Some people even eat nerve tissue. If you like chicken backs, you can break open the backs of the chicken. The spinal cord is there, and some people will eat that aspect or eat that part of the animal. All good ways to get nutritional density into your diet. Oh, love this question. Lynn wants to know, if magnesium thins the blood, would it be dangerous to use if you're taking blood thinners? Well, let's ask that question differently. It's not, would it be safe to take with blood thinners? It's, should you even need blood thinners? Like, what's the whole purpose of a blood thinner? The blood thinner is designed to thin your blood to reduce your risk of recurring stroke or heart attack, right? That's the whole design of a blood thinner. So the bigger question is, why is your blood not thin enough in the first place? Now, there are several things that can naturally help your blood viscosity be thin the way that it's supposed to be, and magnesium is one of them. Selenium is another mineral that helps keep the blood thin because of its action with platelets. Then we have things like omega-3 fatty acids that help keep your blood thin. Some of the compounds in garlic help keep your blood thin. Some of the compounds in oregano help keep your blood thin. There are a lot of products in nature. There are a lot of plant-based compounds that keep your blood viscosity thin. When people have thick blood, it's not because they have a deficiency of blood thinning medication. Remember, a lot of your blood thinning medications block vitamin K. They're actually vitamin K antagonists. Coumadin, warfarin, these are, basic rat poisons. That's the way they were originally created. And it was, we know that they inhibit vitamin K, and vitamin K helps clot the blood. So it doesn't make sense to make the blood thin by preventing clotting, because when you prevent clotting, what happens is every time you ding on a wall, every time you bruise your shoulder, you're blocking your body's ability to clot that. So you get this internal bruises leading to all these little tiny internal hemorrhaging, which causes petechiae all over your body. If you've ever looked at somebody's skin who is on chronic blood thinning medication, they have like pools of blood, little and big pools of blood just periodically on their skin because their blood's being thinned too aggressively, artificially with chemicals. And you can do the same thing naturally. I know no heart doctor is probably going to agree with me, at least no heart doctor who's not functional medicine oriented is going to agree with me on what I just said. But if you are seeing a doctor and they've got you on a blood thinner and it's not congruent to your philosophy, look, the best thing you can do is get a second opinion. But I don't personally recommend that people be on blood thinners if they haven't asked the deeper question, which is, why is your blood thick in the first place? Because again, there's so many different natural things that keep your blood thin. And if your magnesium levels are too low, your blood can be too thick. And if your omega-3 levels are low, your blood can be too thick. And if you're chronically inflamed, your blood can be too thick, right? There's a lot of things that can increase the viscosity of the blood. And all those things that can increase it, none of them have anything to do with artificial blood thinning recommendations. Remember, if you're on those blood thinners too, your doctors are telling you what? They're telling you, take this drug, don't worry about your diet, and by the way, don't eat any leafy greens, because leafy greens contain vitamin K, and we're trying to block your vitamin K. Now, how moronic does that sound when you really think about the biochemistry behind it? It's a travesty. The doctor would tell you to not take in a vitamin that's crucial and critical for your bone health, crucial and critical for your heart health, crucial and critical for your tendons and your ligaments and your joints and your blood supply and protecting you from bleeding to death. Like, why would we not want to do that for the sake of taking this drug for the rest of our life? Because nobody asked the real question, which is, why is your blood too thick? So I know I went off on a tangent there, but I feel like it was important to do. So thanks for listening, Len. Okay, let's see here. So Susan wants to know about muscle death, and I'm not quite sure I understand your question. So could a deficiency between calcium and magnesium be a factor in muscle death? Muscle death is a serious thing. If you're talking about the true death of a muscle, there's a deeper problem than just calcium and magnesium deficiency going on. Maybe you can re-ask that question and give me better clarity on what you're trying to ask me. Somebody wanted to know, is magnesium better to take it with food? And the simple answer is it's always better if you're taking supplements to take them with food, because when you eat food, you prime your digestive tract to turn on, right? When you eat food, the act of smelling, the act of tasting, that activates your pancreas, it activates your digestive enzymes, and it kind of gets the gears moving for digestion. So if you're taking a supplement and you're trying to improve the way it's digested and absorbed, it's definitely a good idea to take it with food. Okay. Okay, sorry guys, my feed was breaking up on me a little bit, so I just wanted to make sure I was getting your questions. Okay. Oh, here it is. Okay, I knew I saw that in there. So can bruxism be a symptom of magnesium deficiency, Marie asks. Simple answer to that, Marie, is yes. Now, for those of you who don't know what bruxism is, it's kind of like a chronic clenching of the jaws. Now, many of you may have a diagnosis of something like TMJ, temporomandibular joint dysfunction, where you grind your teeth at night. That's bruxism, okay? So if you are like constantly tightening down, feel like you're constantly like biting down, yes, that's muscular tightness. Oh, I erased it already. That's muscular tightness. So again, it's a form of, it can be caused by magnesium deficiency. So if you've got that, again, that's just one other of the symptoms, and we didn't write down on the board earlier. There's so many different symptoms of magnesium deficiency. But yes, bruxism is definitely one of them. And so again, if you've got TMJ, then look at magnesium as a potential to see if that doesn't help support that. Brigitte wants to know, aren't soils depleted and food does not have that much magnesium anymore? Yeah, it depends on where you're buying your food, though. Yes, the simple answer is yes. If you're buying food that's mass production farmed, even if it's organic, look, big mass organic production farms, you know, it depends on their soil care. Remember, a lot of the nutrients that we should get come from our food, but originally starts in the soil. It starts with the health of the soil. Remember, the soil has microorganisms in it too, the worms. The microbiome, so to speak, of the soil is very, very important, because what we're learning about plant biology is that many of the plants, as they grow and their roots start to flourish and spread, there are little kind of divots on the roots. They're microscopic, but those are places where bacteria and fungus can attach to that plant and bring nutrients to that plant. So the bacteria and the fungus feed off of the root of the plant, but at the same time provide vitamins and minerals so that that plant can uptake those nutrients. And so when you're picking that plant to eat it, it's going to be more nutritionally dense. So many of you, if you're doing your own gardening, start with your soil. A lot of people use the, you know, like the nitrogen fertilizers, and so they're adding the things to the soil that will help their plant grow big, but not help their plant grow nutrient dense. It's more important to start with healthy soil. That's where the magic happens as it relates to getting good quality nutritionist or nutritionally dense food. So if you've got your own backyard and you want to do some gardening, I highly recommend it. You can, you know, even if you're not growing all of your food, even if you're just growing some of your food, you can learn a little bit more, get your hands in the dirt, you know, connect with the earth, ground a little bit, teach your kids something they should know, and get back to nature a little bit more. All those are great and wonderful things. Now, if you're buying from the store, even if you're buying organic, yes, the answer to that question, Marie, is yes. The food is not quite as nutrient dense because the soil doesn't get that tender love and care that it probably should be getting. In essence, the microbial balance of the soil might be off, and they might be using fertilizing agents to change the pH or the nitrogen balance of the soil without actually affecting the nutritional density of the soil. So yes. Okay. So I think I answered that. Somebody asked again about magnesium chloride. Can be a good version. I actually like using a liquid version of magnesium chloride, taking off the tablespoon as a supplemental for people who have diarrhea with these amino acid chelate versions. I don't know what this means, Amanda. If you're new, maybe you're new. Rheumatoid arthritis, there's no known answers to autoimmune condition. Maybe not in medicine, but there's plenty of answers in functional medicine. There's lots of answers. You should go back and watch some of the, if you're on YouTube, you should check out our playlists. One of them is on gluten-free success stories and on autoimmune success stories. And you'll see lots of people that have had RA that have overcome RA through diet change. Very important that you know that. Because if you've been told the same bill of goods that everyone else has been told, you've basically been lied to. It's that simple. You've just been lied to. Okay. I think I answered that one already. Yeah, Lisa says, so are you saying magnesium supplements are good for indigestion as well? They can be. Again, it depends on why your indigestion is there. You've got to know the cause. And if you are magnesium deficient, can it create an indigestion? Yeah, it can. But there are other reasons why indigestion exists. Okay. So Penny wants to know how to get rid of gut inflammation. So Penny, I'm going to give you a homework assignment. I want you to go back to the Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain archive. And there are a couple different shows that we did on how to heal a leaky gut. Watch those shows and come back next week, same time, and tune back in, and I bet your question will be answered from watching those episodes. So we're out of time, folks. You know the drill. If you haven't already, left me your name and where you're from. Love to see the reach that we're having. Remember, we're trying to save 100 million lives. This information is vital and critical to people all across the world who are being misinformed about health and being misinformed about how they can get healthy. And so I need your help. Just like you need my help and you want my help every Monday night, I need your help spreading this information. Make sure you hashtag save 100 million lives. Make sure that you're sharing this link or this feed with somebody you know, somebody you love, somebody you care about. And we will see you next Monday night, same time, for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Have a great week, and I'm wishing you excellent health.